Spanish by Sideline Sports Network. Hope y'all are having a good day back at work. Been kind of busy on my side, but can't complain too much. Wouldn't matter if I did. Nobody's going to listen anyway. James and Chip. James is in the background right now. After I do these intros, I will get him in. Chip will be a couple of minutes late, but he will also be here. So I think it's time for everybody, obviously, to know that Game Day Vodka is an American-made, an American-distilled, and American-sold vodka. If you have not tried it yet, please go to GameDayVodka.com. As long as you are 21 years of age or older, you can order your favorite team's bottle. And it is a very smooth vodka. It is 6 times distilled over with CO2, which causes it to be extremely smooth. So if you haven't tried it, make sure that you try it. Michael Bartz, what's going on, buddy? Tomorrow, spring practice starts back up. You know, I've been talking about this particular player for a couple of months now in Keziah Holmes. And a lot of people are questioning me. You know, they haven't seen Keziah. They haven't seen what he can do. You know, he hadn't done anything since he's been at Penn State. How could I put him on my top 5 skill player list? Well, now you've got a lot of people saying Keziah Holmes is the guy to watch. Keziah Holmes is the guy that you want to pay attention to. We'll see. We'll see exactly who's who and what's what. Who's going to be that guy for Florida State this year? Are there going to be multiple guys this year? Does it take skills to play every position at Florida State or in any football team? Absolutely. But skill positions are considered to be offensive players that routinely get the ball in their hands. That's why I made it a top 5 skills position list. Because it narrows it down to a subject that I don't add multiple players that don't exactly line up with what a skill player is considered. I'm not putting offensive lineman in there. Does it take skill to be an offensive lineman? Absolutely. But skill players are based off of ball handlers. Ball handlers are the ones that are usually scoring touchdowns, etc. So that's why my top 5 list was who it was. Winston Wright was not put in there because I think Winston Wright is going to be a huge part of how Florida State's successful in this upcoming season, just not as much as the 5 that I put up there. Does that mean that he's a close 6th? Yes. Does that mean that he could surpass what I think he's going to do and be number 1? Possibly. This is all going based off projections before the season starts. It's going based off of what I'm seeing and hearing from practice now. Could that change? Absolutely. It could change any day. But as of right now, that is my top 5 skill players list. They've been the most consistent throughout tour of duty. They also were extremely consistent during the first week or so of spring practice. So therefore, that's the reason why these gentlemen were on my top 5 skill players list. You know, you look at the ones that get left out instead of paying attention to the ones that made it. And for some reason, fans are really good at that. They only worry about the ones who may be their favorite, or they worry about the ones that didn't make it versus the ones that are on the list and instead of wondering why is that guy on the list, let me go figure this out or listen back and see why Chris would put him on his top of the list, which remember, this is just my opinion. I'm no football god or anything to that nature. I am just stating that's who I think will be one of the most productive pieces for Florida State going into the 2023 season. I personally love doing the list because it makes it fun. It makes the offseason fun. It makes talking about Florida State football fun. So there's going to be multiple lists that come out for me that maybe everyone doesn't exactly line up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 1 through 10. But you probably will agree with me more than you disagree with me on who I have on the list in whole. Maybe you would have them 1 spot lower or 1 spot ahead. But regardless, those gentlemen made that list. And, here's the cool part. It's all for fun. It's nothing set in stone. I'm not telling you that player X and Y is worse than player Z. I'm just merely stating who's been the most consistent and who's been doing the best in spring ball and tour of duty and during the off season. And that's based off of what I'm hearing and seeing. So I hope y'all enjoy the content that we continue to put out. I hope it gives you things to look at, and then also you can start putting your own list together. That's where it's supposed to be anyway. That's what's supposed to make it fun. Here's I'm going to be coming out with top 5 defensive players on. Let's see. I'll probably drop it before Thursday's show. I'm going to drop the top 5 defensive players list that I personally think, as of right now, will be the top 5 players on the defense. And that's based off of projections and what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. Same way with the skill players. And then I'm going to drop a top 3 offensive lines list, who I think the top 3 offensive linemen are. And can those things change? Absolutely. Could people get hurt? Absolutely. Could someone blossom quicker than the other, or blossom and then never hide again and just show out? That's absolutely possible. But what this episode is going to be about tonight is why Florida State, in my opinion, is one of the most dangerous teams entering the 2023 season. I think they're the most dangerous ACC team by far, and I think that they can be one of the most dangerous teams in the country. So we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. First, I'm going to bring James on, see how he's doing. How's it going, James?
What's going on, man?
Oh, not a whole lot. Well, I mean, a little bit. I've been waiting on some emails. Just getting told I'm getting them. I'm waiting. My phone's like right here all day. It has been. But right before the show started, I just got off the phone with one of the gentlemen that said that it should be coming over in the draft any moment from the assistant. So I'm waiting. So when it happens, I might pause out for a second and let y'all continue.
Sounds like my life.
Yeah. Everything is always hurry up and wait, as usual. But without telling you or Chip what we were technically going to be talking about tonight, obviously, I'm letting everyone know why I think Florida State is the most dangerous team in the ACC, and then why they could be one of the most dangerous in the country. Coming into the 2023 season, there's a lot of people on board with this. I had conversations with quite a few people today, reporter-wise, not just for Florida State, but nationally. They picked 3 teams. A gentleman from ESPN, which he'll drop his list and I'll share it on Twitter. But me and him talked for about an hour today, and he's got Florida State at the top of his list, and he absolutely hates Florida State. He is a former Boston College alum, so he played for Boston College, so he doesn't care anything for us. But he's picking Florida State. I talked to a gentleman off of ABC and a gentleman off of Fox Sports, and both of them have Florida State as their dark horse being in the playoffs this season. So it's not just me that thinks that Florida State is going to be dangerous. And if you're not on board with Florida State being dangerous, I would assume that people could see how they could be. Like they could end up being a dangerous team. Tomorrow we start back spring practice, full pads. Well, shoulder pads. I don't want to say full pads. This Thursday at 6, excuse me. At 6 p.m. on Twitter Spaces, we will have Robert Scott, and potentially a surprise guest, but Robert Scott will be on the Spaces with us Thursday at...
Have to be a little bit later than 6.
No, at 6. He's not practicing.
Oh, that's right. He's not practicing. I forget. So he didn't. I don't. You know what? Now that I think about it, I don't even remember seeing Rob at the practice that I was at. So that's interesting.
Yeah, Rob's out for the entirety of spring. He had an injury in the Oklahoma game, and he just got it taken care of about a week and a half ago, and he'll be out for the entirety of spring. So after his meeting at 5, which will last till about 5:30, he will be on with us at 6 on the Spaces, and then we have a show at 7:30.
Yeah, I'll be at practice. I'll be at the Thursday practice.
So obviously, we had a really good interview with Michael Alford. We've had quite a few people watch it. Everyone gave us a huge shout out on how well the interview was done. They loved the questions that were asked. I even sent you an email from one person that asked a bunch of questions.
Yeah, could have done a show off of that.
Could have. I was impressed with the cool part was I had about 12 of those. Some asked very similar questions. Some asked questions that wasn't even in that email that were. I do use what fans write me on those emails as things to hit on in the show. A lot of times, this one we can hit on some of the stuff that was asked, but Michael Alford had made a statement toward me and you as far as Florida State's not their first initiative is not jump out of the ACC and go elsewhere. They're proud to be part of the ACC. They have been since 1992, and they want this to work. But Michael Alford merely brought up the facts that this is not good for both sides of the marriage, and us being Florida State, we're not content with what's being given to us. What he can't obviously come out and say we're actively trying to jump ship. Even if we were, he couldn't say that. And I don't think that we are actively just trying to jump ship. We want to give the ACC the opportunity to do what they, should do for us. But you and I going back and forth on this and listening to multiple other people, I just don't see where the ACC could pull off getting us any more money because I don't think anyone's going to agree to unequal sharing. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I even think unequal sharing is irrational, or it's not enough, because we'll still be in a deficit. It's just the fact that the ACC doesn't make enough money. That's the problem. And what I like to do is I like to take things that people make more complex and put them in simple, everyday analogies. So here's the thing. Mike Alford brought this up. He used to use his analogy of a marriage. There was a marriage, and in the beginning of that marriage, I would say going back to 1992, we've been successful. We brought a lot more to make everything successful, and we have not been able to reap the benefits of being a part of the successful marriage. The ACC was doing things in the beginning to be innovative. I mean, when you think about it, from 92 to 2002 is only 10 years. Which, if you think about it, 10 years ago, we won a national championship in 2013. That was when we were the first to talk about expansion. So Florida State was in the beginning of the expansion. And originally it was supposed to be 4 teams, ended up being 2, then eventually they added more. And that was cool. But you never capitalized and you cooled and you let other teams catch up. You let the SEC catch up. You let the Big Ten catch up. And then what they did was they became more shrewd. And they asked for more money. And now it became a money game. And so it's a situation where I don't really think the ACC, Florida State is kind of not cheated. They've seen their cool girlfriend in the life that she's living, and she's trying to compete. And now you go back to your husband, and you're like, I need you to pay these bills. And they just don't have it. Doesn't make them a bad person. Just means they don't have enough. So now what you have to do is while you're in your prime, go find a way to get something else. And I think that's where the FSU is at. So you can do a situation where it's an unequal split, but you still don't have enough money there in order to make the university happy. Because again, you're looking at within the next 5 years, your major rival will get close to $100 million a year. and at max you'll get 50 to 60 a year. You're still playing a major deficit game. And with what FSU is doing their part, see, it'd be different if everybody in the AC, not even everybody, because that's still irrational. If I would say if 8 to 10 teams in the ACC were doing their part to effectively make the conference better. Right now, the only schools that you can say from on the field play to off field maintenance, you can only say Clemson, Florida State, and then I'll bring Miami into the fold with the line as Cuban. Wake Forest isn't about this life, and there's no knock on them. They're just not. Duke isn't about this life. Boston College isn't about this life. Georgia Tech isn't about this life. Pitt may want to, and they may have a donor base, but they haven't really been about this life, both on and off the field. Trying to think. I know I'm missing a ton of them right now, but it's just, if you really look at everybody, it's just not a fair split. And if they were, the conference would be more valuable. That's why you have to look at, both regionality and a regional scope and a national scope. From a national perspective, I would want to be in a conference that's national. My bad. Well, North Carolina is kind of trying, but they're just not. They do more. We still recognize North Carolina more for basketball than we would for football. And football pays bills. And that's the part where I really think, my bad to go back, where the ACC really dropped the ball.
Yeah.
They had an opportunity to dominate basketball with the picks that they brought in from the Big East and really dominate the game in that. But then you had football. And you had a chance to really uplift everybody with football, but you allow people to get complacent. Even so, when you're moving the football game, because you didn't get the Florida State-Miami matchup that you thought you were going to get annually, you moved it from Florida, which would have at least got you a 65-degree weather game. Still relatively cold. I don't know if anybody's been in North Carolina December 8th, the first weekend in December. It is cold. I went to the one in 2014. It was a fun game, but it wasn't fun to sit in the elements for. You even had the opportunity this year, which a lot of people don't know. Orlando was up for bid for the ACC headquarters to move. All the things that you needed to do to show that you were going in the right direction, you never did. And so this is the reason why you're in this situation. I am a proponent of people grow apart. It doesn't mean that you're bad people. It doesn't mean that, I think sometimes to make it easier or more complicated, people make things messy. But the reality is sometimes we were young kids. We were having a great time, and we made the best move that we needed to make for that time. But in this construct, if we don't leave, we'll lose ourselves in a conference to be faithful. And I think at the end of the day, who are you being faithful to? If you can't be faithful to yourself, then you'll never be faithful to another person. So you have to always take care of your star player. And for Florida State, they've got to entertain, but at the same time, because there's legal things, because there are other moving pieces that have to happen behind the scenes, you can't just go out and say we're out of this bitch. You gotta make sure you got somewhere to go. So it's I kudos to Alford for releasing enough information to make other people have to make moves.
Yeah, and what I'll touch on a little bit as far as this goes, which I started going back and looking at the numbers because of what Alford had dropped to us. We equal somewhere around 17% of the total revenue that the ACC gets, and we only get about 7% of the revenue share. So here's the issue. If Florida State was to get 10% of the equal revenue share, we would eliminate $15 million closer, which that's a big difference in only, what is that, 3 more percent. If you only took ours, 17% of all of ACC revenue, but we only get 7% of all equal share revenue. So it's not the same number. Everybody's like, okay, well, we're getting 7, so they're only making 10% more than that's not how this works. So we're missing out. If we was just to get 10% of what we're supposed to, we would be making about 18.5 to $22 million more a year if we were getting 10% of what we were supposed to. But that's all over the entire board. Here's what also, like, Florida State's football program, viewers watched, brings on about 13.75% of all the revenue. And then check this part, this really wild. The rest of it is softball, not basketball. Softball over the past 5 years has brought just as much viewership to the ACC as Duke, North Carolina, Pitt, and Boston College's football programs combined. If we go break those numbers down, our softball team does better than most of the football teams in the ACC, which is wild. But it is what it is. So Florida State has a huge gripe that, they're obviously letting the ACC know this. Alford had nothing but great things to say about the commissioner, for the ACC. And, it's not like the commissioner of the ACC now is the one that signed the deal that we currently have, or that Michael Alford and the president of Florida State agreed to the deal that the ACC got at that point in time either. So, all of these guys that have came in for Florida State and the new commissioner for the ACC, this was done before their time, and now they're having to battle out what to do in the scenario because they didn't agree to these terms, but they're having to deal with what had taken place before their time. So I believe that Alford is going to continue to work with, continue to help in as many ways possible for this, this huge gap for us to try to fill it in any way possible. But after you do the math so many ways, and there's only so many ways you can do it, Florida State is going to continuously be behind $30+ million a year. And unless the ACC can get ESPN to agree to come to the table quicker than 2036 and change this, which I don't know how they could, but unless they get them to agree to this, then it's kind of, a no-brainer. Florida State have to move on because we cannot continue to compete being that far behind.
And one of the things is a catch-22. The only thing that we can really do to help the ACC in this is win.
Right.
If us and Clemson are doing what we, and then with the new shift, if us and Clemson are looking like we're going 13-1, 11-2 every year, and the world starts talking about us, and they're talking about putting 2 ACC teams in the college football playoff, then that makes that. But that's going to take a period of 5 to 6 years to really start getting that heat, because that's when, if you go back and you look at what ESPN, ABC, and the family of networks, they felt, well, not necessarily, ASP, because ABC could get the primetime game. They fell in love with the SEC because Alabama in 2007 really started setting everything on fire. And before that, you had LSU, you had Florida, you had all these guys rotating. So the national spotlight came down and made a conference more bigger than what it really is. I've got news for everybody. The SEC is not the best football conference. The SEC has the best football teams every year that win, but from top to bottom, their conference is nowhere near as good as what the Big Ten has. And that's just the truth. When you can go look at it and do the research yourself. But every year, Georgia, Alabama, or it'll be LSU comes in and things of that nature. Now, where Florida State has people really thinking that they might be that bad B, is because they beat the SEC West champion that went and played Georgia halfway decent as anybody else. I mean, they end up getting whooped, but it's still at the end of the day, they played them just about as good as anybody. So, but if FSU and Clemson are doing that, they could add value to the ACC. But at the same time, all that does is add value to them for other conferences to bring them in. So I think, because again, if the Big Ten is looking for another opportunity to have another team where they can bring the 1 and the 2 in the playoff, then this is just an opportunity for them to do that. But I really do think with this going, and I saw somebody say, if we wait till after 2027, it'll be the death penalty. I don't necessarily agree with that as much because I do know this, and this is where everybody kind of where ESPN or the NCAA has opened it up again for debate. It's because it's going to expand to what 12 is it 12 teams?
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, just think about what would have happened with if they would have expanded it to 12 teams. Guess who's probably in the college football playoff this season? Florida State. So when you open it up like that, now you have the chance to be able to say, well, while we may not have the top team, we've got 4 to 5, and that's the only thing the ACC can do. They got to go beg North Carolina. They got to go beg everybody else. Do what you got to do to get competent coaches, to get the best players, so that we can keep these guys, so that we can go to the table and say we need to negotiate it. Because I really think the only play they have is to go and say we're out of here. ACC to ESPN. The problem is you're running out of people because the ESPN has fully fallen in bed with the SEC. And the SEC and CBS said, bump it. We're going to fully fall in bed with the Big Ten, as well as NBC and I think it's 3 networks, right? Oh, and Fox. I mean, the only thing you can really do, and these stations don't have that weight anymore. Like now, 20, 30 years ago, you could have went and said, I'm going to go TNT. You could have done what the NBA did. I'm going to go to the alternate networks that are in a lot of homes and things and break your deal, but they don't have the money to be able to give you a $1 billion group deal. Now, there is one thing that is looming, and we're seeing it with the NFL, and Jeff Bezos don't mind spending bread. Your best bet, and I think the Pac-12 is flirting with them, but the best bet is go Amazon Prime. And you can get that from Amazon Prime because we see the NFL got that for Thursday Night Football for the last 2 seasons. So it's things to do. They get paid a lot more money than I do to go out here and try to figure this thing out for them. But personally, I think you got to go. Because even then, even if you take advantage of streaming out the gate, everybody's going to eventually shift to streaming. Heck, CBS has their own platform. CBS Go, right? I think that's the name of it. So they'll and HBCUs are starting to stream their game. So people will go there, but like you gotta crap or get off the pot, man. Money is the king. That's the only thing that can save this relationship is to figure out like and it's a very simple number. You have to show me how you're going to get me to 80 million minimum. If you can't show me how you're going to get me to 80, then there's really no reason for us to continue to talk. Because 100 million is really where we should be at.
Yep. First, I want to give a shout out to Michael Barge for the $10 donation. He says, no question, just supporting. And then Jeff Hill drops a $10 donation. And Jeff says, I can see us leaving by 2027. I don't see you staying in this conference. In later than that will be the death sentence we need out to get out as soon as possible. And James kind of touched on that he thinks we'll be fine if we are here after 2027, which I think will be fine regardless. But I don't think Florida State takes that long. I think you get an announcement by around 2025 of what we're going to do, and then you have a decision made by 2027, 2028. That's my personal opinion. But I think Florida State definitely announces it by that time frame. Chips made it into the back, so I'm going to bring him up. And then we're going to dive into this, how Florida State can be really dangerous. Evening, Chip. How's it going?
What's going on, fellas?
I ain't watched NASCAR in 2 weeks.
I don't ever plan on watching NASCAR.
I've literally never watched one race.
I'm white. I'm not that.
Well, tonight's episode, Tip, is about how dangerous I believe Florida State is and is going to be in the 2023 season. I want to see if both of y'all agree with me on the scenarios that I'm about to put out. So, Florida State is about 7 athletes over the mark for the 85 scholarship players. So obviously, there's going to be a minimum of 7 have to leave. What 7? No one knows, right? We're not 100% sure. Could be someone we don't want to lose. Could be some guys we don't know. Don't know. But regardless, Florida State has brought back 76% of its production. They have added players like Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, and others. I'm just naming a couple that are really standing out right now because Isaiah Holmes is one that they added before the season even started, to be honest. But there's quite a few that Florida State has brought on. Like, we're still waiting on waivers as far as Meach goes. We're waiting on waivers as far as Daryl Jackson goes. But when I talk to Florida State's administration, they're very confident that those waivers are going to be approved by the NCAA. So moving forward, if those are indefinitely going to happen, and they do get those waivers, then the question comes is what 7 are going to leave Florida State? Whom are they? And are they going to be specifics to, depth that we have on the defensive line? Or is it going to be offensive linemen? Or are we just talking about guys that, DBs that don't really get time, or wide receivers that are out of place possibly, a couple of running backs? Who knows? So here's the other thing that's popped up. A bunch of people have started back on this Destin Hill shit. And what kills me is now everybody's like, no, it's real this time. Last year, the exact reports came out that Destin Hill was coming in May. May came and gone, and there was no Destin Hill. Now, a different person in the same network says Destin Hill is lined up to enroll at Florida State in May of 2023. Well, if we're already 7 over the limit, and you're talking about a kid that is 2 years removed from football, means he's probably not in football shape. He's from that class that was the bubble class, is what a lot of people are calling it. That, a lot of the 2020 kids did not pan out because of COVID. Like, it was, well, we think they're the best, so they gave them this high ranking. And for the most part, they said that 62% of that class is a bust. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they've stated. So does Florida State, so to speak, waste that scholarship on Destin Hill if he does indeed show up? James, you can start.
I think the only reason you would do it is so that Mike can prove that he's a guy. It looks good with that, but I remember last year that some people were very confident that what needed to take place was going to happen to come in. And you brought up, I think you really brought it the most, even if he does. And I think there's ways to go about in name, image, and likeness helps now with roster management when it comes to being 7 over, by the way. There's only one way I would take him is in a, I hate to say it, but almost like a 1 year, see how he fits in type of deal. And I wouldn't waste a scholarship on it. I would say, hey, we'll still accept you. We'll still bring you in. Here's a $25,000 a year deal. That somehow you'll pay your tuition, you'll get yourself a good solid meal plan, and we'll go from there. That'll be the only way that I really put it. And I'm not saying he has to start, but if you see he's a great teammate, you see he's a good practice player, he's buying into the intensity of what's necessary, and he's making the defense better, then I think obviously he has some talent. If you go watch his highlight film, that makes you want to be able to take the risk. Outside of that, I think with the 2 wide receivers they got right now, the 4 wide receivers that I think will sign in this class and in 2025, I don't really see honestly, I don't see a place for him with those guys, because it's one thing I'll say Ron Dugans has got right now is he's got that mojo. It might be 5 guys that they signed in this class, but we still haven't seen Goldie Lawrence come in and what he could do. Even though I wasn't the hugest fan of him as a wide receiver, seeing him play, but he's still 6'3", 200 pounds. That's still a pretty thick guy. But we know what Hakeem Williams could probably end up doing, as well as I can't think of but his name from I think it's from Vieira.
Jacobs.
Yeah, Jacobs. Yeah, Jacobs is already shining. So, uh, God bless. I hope the story ends well for him. I like everybody to get a good college education, to be able to get a restart. But at this point, I think guys are using that as clickbait, and I think we shouldn't even really be. I think it should be one of those things where I used to have heard people say last year, I'll believe it when he takes a picture in front of Stroger Library with the jersey on, and then he takes a picture next to the Bobby Bowden statue, and then he goes to practice. That's when they'll believe that he's a part of it.
Chip, what are your thoughts on do we waste a scholarship on Destin Hill if he does indeed show up in May?
Well, I mean, I don't understand why people are still talking about somebody that has not even set foot on campus. This is what, 2 years? This has been speculation now for 2 years. I mean, he wouldn't he's got scholarships are earned. He hasn't been playing 2 years. Like, no, like James said, here's 25,000 1 year, prove it. We got to see if you even fit our program, because Norvell has established what he wants. The players have bought into what he wants. You don't want to bring somebody in that could potentially be a cancer. I'm not saying he's a cancer, but we don't know if this guy even fits in with what doing what Norvell has already established. So I don't understand why fans are still, and like James said, unless it's just clickbait, are still talking about somebody that has not even showed up on campus yet. Like, to me, it's absurd.
Yeah, and here's my reasoning behind why the best case scenario for Destin Hill, in Florida State's realm of doing things, would be a PWO, in my opinion. Here's a preferred walk-on offer. We're going to give you your opportunity because of whatever situation that it is that you've been through, and it makes Mike Norvell a man of his word. But you can't tell me from 2020 to now 2023 that Mike Norvell has not found and fit that need that Destin Hill was supposed to be. You can't tell me that through the transfer portal and recruiting classes, 2 years removed now, that he has not found exact what he needed to fulfill what Destin Hill was supposed to be. So, to me, you're not 12 deep in the wide receiver room, but you're at least 6 deep. You've at least got 6 definite wide receivers that, in my opinion, are going to go in and get you yards that are necessary. I mean, I think Hakeem Williams, being a true freshman, is a 200, 300-yard guy in his first year. I don't know if a Destin Hill is even in shape to run a route. So I don't understand where people are so high on this kid. I would have understood if he was the number one player in the nation. Like, if that was the situation. But he was like, I think 126, nationally, 5th overall wide receiver, whatever the case was. I would understand if he was the number one player overall and, okay, yeah, we got to give it a shot. But in this situation, I'm willing to bet the kid doesn't even show up. I don't even think he steps foot on campus in May. But I could be wrong, and maybe he does. Maybe he's got it figured out. But what we're going to dive into is Florida State has a weird schedule this year, so to say. Our home games aren't the greatest. Outside of Miami, can't really say that there's a huge game that's going to be played here at Doak this year. You're losing the LSU game to Orlando, and I'm not saying that Florida State's losing the game, people. I'm saying that we're not playing it in Doak Campbell. So therefore, your biggest game that's going to be played in Tallahassee this year is going to be with the Miami Hurricanes. So one of two things can come from this. You should go undefeated at home. You should win all of those games. So if you pull off winning against LSU, which is your neutral site game, then your setup is to not lose against Pitt, not to lose against Clemson at Clemson, and then a couple others that are sprinkled in, like Florida. You don't want to go to Florida and lose. So we do have some decent games that are on the road that are going to be, so to speak, tougher than what we're actually playing at home. Our biggest challenges are on the road. LSU, I think, is our biggest challenge. That's technically a road game because it's not in Doak Campbell. And then you play Clemson at Clemson. So when you put this schedule together, Florida State weighs heavily on winning all of its home games. It also weighs heavy to win its away games like Clemson and LSU because the trajectory shows the quicker we play those two teams, the better shot we have of winning because of what LSU's trying to do. They're implementing a lot of new players. They've lost a lot. And then you look at Clemson, they're implementing a new offense and defensive coordinator, new schemes on offense, new schemes on defense. They've lost quite a few players as well. So playing them early is really going to help Florida State out. With that, the thing that's definitely fighting against us is where our bye falls at. Our bye is in a really weird spot. It's on the 5th week, I believe. And it's really strange because then we have a 7-game stretch or 8-game stretch after that that is going to be just hell on wheels as far as injury prone would go. So you don't get any more breaks after the 5th week. And it's wide open and anything can happen. But if you go based off of analytics, Florida State has right now a 58.3% chance of going undefeated in the regular season, according to the metrics that ESPN has put up. Now, if you go based off of the metrics that Fox Sports and CBS Sports has put up, we have a 49.9% chance of winning out the entire season as far as regular season goes. The only game that they have us right now potentially losing is against Clemson, and right now, without the numbers dropping, they were going to have us as a 2-point underdog going into Clemson. And that would be as if we went in today. So for Clemson to only be a 2-point at this moment, to be a 2-point favorite against Florida State, you would think that Florida State has one hell of an opportunity to go out and prove how great they really are now. So all of the momentum was going in Florida State's direction coming close to the end of the season. A lot of people were stating, no team offensively was hotter than Florida State the last 3 or 4 games of the season. I think we all could agree on that. So if Florida State picks up from where they left off, even before the Oklahoma game, if we could pick up that momentum, do y'all think Florida State has a legitimate chance of winning out in the regular season?
Yeah. I think Florida State at worst is a 1-loss team. But Florida State's biggest obstacle this year isn't a team. This is QC, and it's what I tell my son's flag football team every Saturday. So who is the only team that can beat us? And they say us. Say who's the only team that can beat us? Us. And when we play our game, now we're always undefeated. And when the games are close or where something doesn't happen, it's a drop here. It's a kid just didn't pay attention. And the other team's well coached too, but I'm looking like, did they do anything to us that we could not have prevented or if we were on our A game? And then when we play 100%, we blow everybody out. So what do I mean by that with Florida State? What I mean by that is I'm going to go ahead and just round up everything. You got a 1,000-yard receiver. You got a 1,000-yard running back. You've got a 3,000-yard passer. Like, that is production that is unknown. And you got better by adding this is no disrespect to Wyatt Rector, but you lose a Wyatt Rector. And Biscuit gets a season better, but you gain a Jaheim Bell and a Murlock. You lose a Pookie, but you gain a Akeem Williams, you gain a Winston Wright, you gain actually Akeem's not the same wide receiver. The young man we just talked about from the other wide receiver, not Goldie. You have Jacobs. That's more of a Pookie. Him and Winston Wright are more Pookie. You lose Micah. Pittman, but I'll say you can gain Akeem Williams, who's a bigger version of that. So in theory, all of your losses in the skill position areas, you got better. You lose Dylan Gibbons, but you get young Suge Knight, young buddy from Auburn, and you get the other light skinned bulldozer from Colorado. You get some mass. You lose your guards, but you get some mass that makes Maurice Smith, who may or may not be it, but you also got set. So you got a little bit better in where it may be murky. It looks like it should be fine. Defensively, you lose Coop, but you get Darryl Jackson, who's another big body. You've got your linebacker core literally comes back with one player better. With Sunshine coming from LA, from out of California. So you're deeper now at your linebacker core. You get one of the best corners in the ACC in Cypress. You have some of the best recruits that you had in the last class. So, like, when you look at, like, this is actually Alan Cruz says it best. For the first year, you look like you didn't lose, you reloaded. And it's a ton of experience coming back. So, the problem that comes in this, and the reason why I say the only team that can beat us is because I've been in that situation. We were in that situation in 2005. We had 4 first-round draft picks on defense in 2005. We had a lot of guys get drafted or picked up on NFL rosters in that last season that I was in. But here's what happened. I love Texas Hold'em, right? You find out who's who at the final table when the money is put on the table. And it doesn't mean it's just no character issues. It's just different. You're trying to get to the league, right? Then all of a sudden, you're blowing people out. So you're not getting the 20 touches as you used to get, Trey. So you got to get to 100 on 10. That's tough. If a wide receiver gets targeted 6 times in the game, that's a lot of targets. But what if we're blowing the team out? We can't keep throwing. We got to get somebody else in there. What happens when now the world is double teaming our stud wide receiver, and now, which is good because it helps the offense open up, and now everybody else is eating. What people don't realize is now you starting to got girls, you got a little bit of money in your pocket, you got, because trust me, money's always been in there. Hey man, am I past the statute of limitations? Yes, money's always been involved. Money, girls, alcohol, cheering, fans are cheering now. Everybody's telling you this, and then somebody gets in your ear and says, you know, Coach Norvell, Coach Norvell's always loving on you. But that's it. But basically, yeah.
I was just waving at Michael Bartz. He was saying, hey.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, but basically it's just what happens is, and again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I don't want this to happen. I truly want to believe all the articles that are going to say that we get coached, and we've never loved anybody this more before. But I've been in that before. It's not a lack of love. It's just different when money's on the table. And I think I think they should be fine. I think that but there are some things that just happen naturally. Jealousy, it naturally happens. When you're in a competitive atmosphere. But I think that's the only thing that could derail them is having guys try to do more than what they're coached to do.
Chip, in your opinion, we're basically staying on the same subject, but do you have faith that Norvell and staff are going to implement the discipline that's needed for these guys not to shoot themselves in the foot?
Oh yeah, I believe Mike is not going to let that happen. Like James said, we're going to be our own worst enemy this come this we got to get where we're not believing the hype ESPN, because ESPN's not on our jock right now, but they will be by week 5. And these guys just got to stay away from the articles, everything that's praising them, because the same newspapers that were praising them were just down on them the year before that. They don't need to buy into the hype. They need to just take one game at a time, one step at a time. And Norvell, man, he's got his he's on the pulse of this team, and I do not believe he's going to allow that to happen. Because I also believe he's the same man that'll put his foot up their ass too if he has to.
Definitely agree, and so this is clear in the chat. There was no racism. He was Tony. So James up in the top right corner is a former fullback at Florida State. So he's a little bit more than just a real FSU fan. But I appreciate everybody looking out to make sure there's no racism. But that's not racist. He's just stating that he seemed like a real FSU fan. But he's more than that. He bled, sweat, and cried on that field. So, anyways, moving forward, I've got about 9 minutes left. And what I want to jump into is I look at the ACC, which is obviously our conference, and that's the majority of our games. Based off our ACC schedule, based off of what everyone's lost, your two toughest opponents in the ACC, well, one of them's debatable. So Clemson's one, and then it's between Duke and Pittsburgh. Those should be your two toughest ACC opponents. And I personally think people are going to hate me for this. I think Duke beats Clemson in the opener. I think Duke is going to surprise.
You're not saying anything I'm not, because Duke.
The reason I'm saying this is because if the people are still injured that I expect to be injured for Clemson on the defensive line and also in their secondary, if they are still injured and Duke has who they supposedly have, that is going to be a low-scoring but physical game that Duke is going to run up and down the field. Not a lot of scoring, but just enough to be able to beat them. And obviously that could go the opposite way. I believe more people are going to pick Clemson beating Duke than anything. But the reason I say Duke has a huge shot is because of what Duke's not changing a whole lot. Duke's playing the same scheme they played last year. They did not lose a lot of players. They're going to try to implement the run as much as possible. I think Clemson, with their new defensive scheme that they're putting together, I have heard from people at Clemson that their spring has looked like garbage so far. Now, does that mean it stays that way and Clemson doesn't end up being what Clemson has been? No, but this is the first time in quite some time that I've heard Clemson's first few spring practices have been garbage. And that's what I've heard. That it's ugly. They look slow. They look out of place, etc. Now, is it possible that Clemson goes out there and blows Duke out and it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody? Yes, but I don't think that happens because I think Duke is disciplined. This new coach has got them really believing in themselves, and I think it's a potential. It's bad for us, to be honest, if Duke does beat Clemson. The reason that I say that is because when we beat Clemson, it takes credibility away, and then Duke also thinks that they can beat us, and then we have to play them as well. So, not saying that we should lose to Duke. I'm just saying that I don't think Clemson's the shoe-in this year. Like, where Florida State should be an ACC contender, I think Clemson has more to prove than Florida State does at this point in time, just based off of new quarterback play, loss of production, new offense and defensive coordinators. Just a lot of stuff is going in a weird trajectory for Clemson, and they didn't end the season well. They played like garbage. So I don't know if they believe in themselves. I don't know if they believe in the coaching staff. I don't know if they believe in what they're doing. So the reason that I say that I want Clemson to do what they're supposed to, so when we beat them, it means more. Because if Duke does beat Clemson and then Florida State beats them, they're like, well, we lost to Duke this year. Like it's not credible to them if we beat them. They're like, well, y'all are supposed to beat us. We lost to Duke, for God's sakes. So I don't want them to lose. I'm just stating that if Clemson don't open their eyes, that they could get caught sleeping, is all I'm merely stating. Should they? No, but it could happen. Just like that game where Chip brings it up, and a lot of people don't agree with us playing that, was it North Alabama, in between Miami and Florida, that could be a game you're just asleep on because, oh, it's North Alabama. We ain't worried about it. I think Duke is just an early sleeper for what Clemson's season could be. I mean, I think everybody should be hyped up for the first game of the season, but I'm just saying, I think we should watch the game because it could be closer than what it should be. Clemson should be able to do a lot with them. I'm going to jump to this donation that Jeff sent, another one. It never gets old, Jeff, I'll tell you that. You can send as many as you want. I appreciate it. Dangerous team, in my opinion, because I think our offensive line and defensive line are both going to be really good. And if you can play good to great in the trenches, you can win a championship. I definitely agree with that. Championships are definitely won in the trenches. I will never disagree with that. But I've got about 5 minutes left, guys. James obviously is still wanting people to join Den Media Group as far as YouTube goes. So go look up. I'll have that in the bottom of the description of the video after this ends. But go to Den Media Group, subscribe to his channel. He also has 3 members. Is it 3 memberships up?
We got 13 memberships. So we're trying to get to 30. Trying to get to 30.
Okay. So how many different memberships do you have?
We have 4 memberships.
4 different ones? Okay.
Yeah.
So y'all go over and check it out. The perks are listed. It tells you what each one would get. And obviously the highest one gets all and then above. But make sure that you go over and at least subscribe to the channel, because as soon as he gets to 2,000 subscribers, he's going to give away 200 and...
Well, it's 250 right now. So it was 200,
right,
but we're about 250 away. So we're giving away $250.
All right. So if you go over there and subscribe to his channel, as soon as it hits 2,000, you are entered in the possibility of winning the $250 at this point in time. So make sure, if you are not subscribed to Den Media on YouTube, you make sure you go over there and do it. And Chip down below me has a Facebook page, Unconquered 850. Make sure that you go and you join the Facebook group, because he has so many former Noles on there. He does a great job on making sure everyone interacts on the page. Everyone's chopping it up back and forth, talking about the Noles. And then there's some really funny stuff that comes across the board every once in a while as well. So make sure that y'all go and check them out. You can also find both of them on Twitter. You can also find both of them on Instagram. But the main key focus for James is Den Media Group, and the main one for Chip is going to the Facebook group. Guys, I'm going to finish this off real quick. I got 2 minutes. I appreciate y'all coming on. All right, so y'all don't get too wild out on me because of what I'm saying about Duke and Clemson. What I'm stating is that I think Duke makes that game uncomfortable for Clemson and could potentially win it based off of Clemson not being ready based on what they're trying to implement into a short period of time with a new offense, a new defensive coordinator, with a quarterback that's still unproven. He has talent, but is he proven to be a starter yet? I don't believe so. They've lost some offensive linemen. They also lost a couple of defensive linemen. They lost, I think, 2 DBs that were vital to what they do. Lost 1 or 2 wide receivers. So there's just some pieces that they've got to figure out. Did they have guys behind them that are good? Yes. But what I'm stating is they don't have that experience of being a starter in close games. So that's what I'm basing it off of. I'm not stating that Duke is a more talented team, have a better coach. I'm just stating that Duke has a lot less to work on in the offseason than what Clemson is trying to do due to implementing all these new systems. So with that, we didn't get into the true depth of why I think Florida State is one of the most dangerous teams in the 2023 season coming up. But it's simple. I think Jordan Travis, it all, starts and ends with him. You're as good as your quarterback.